sign that used to be there. I think this picture was taken it's actually shot on film. I think that was taken in '98. So this sign is no longer there.
It's not.
They moved it.
Did they? Where'd they move it
It's
to?
down closer to the stream.
Oh, down the hill now.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
people
a new
stole
one
it.
there.
Oh, so there's still death and destruction. If
Oh,
you
yeah,
do-
oh, yeah,
Okay.
it's still,
Okay.
I turned back if I were you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, don't go here. So the 100-mile wilderness actually isn't 100 miles, right? It's that section of the Appalachian Trail from Route 15 to Able Ridge, and it's 97 trail miles. But of course that changes every couple of years, every time they do reroutes and different things. But I think currently it's 97 miles. On this sign it says 90 miles. I don't know how they gained 7 miles. I think that's just not correct. But in a sense, people have begun talking about the 100-mile wilderness as the area, not just the trail, but the area all around there, kind of the whole Central Highlands area. It's called the 100-mile wilderness because it's the longest stretch of the Appalachian Trail without a paved road crossing or a town. But it's not really a wilderness, right? There's lots of logging roads through it and so forth. I remember when I read A Walk in the Woods. When it came out. I was working at the Borders bookstore in Bangor at the time. And it's interesting, the only two books about hiking about backpacking that most people know, like your average general audience, is A Walk in the Woods and Cheryl Strayed's
Yeah.
Wild.
Wow.
And they both are incredibly inaccurate, right? Yeah, so you read A Walk in the Woods and you're gonna think that like the Barren Chairback Range is some great howling wilderness. I mean, I day hike there all the time, and I'm sure many of you have as well, right? And I remember when the same year that he hiked it was the year that my wife and I hiked the main section of the Appalachian Trail. We didn't run into him or anything. But I can remember going across Barren Mountain, and they were doing a bunch of logging down in the valley. So it didn't even feel like wilderness that year, you know. But if we want to call it wilderness, fine. It's pretty wild, right? Right. So I am Greg Westrich. This is what happens when you hike with your kids. This, you can see from the sign, it's on the North Traveler. And I did this thing with my son. We started when he was 8. He asked me to take him backpacking. So I did a little loop in the north end of Baxter State Park up in the freeze-out section. And I got the idea then that we would hike, because I had always wanted to backpack from one end of Baxter to the other and take about 2 weeks. But you know, when are you gonna find 2 weeks? So what I did is my son and I did it in little kid-size chunks. So we did that first one when he was 8, and we did the last chunk when he was 11. And this was, so that's the third trip when we did the Traveler Loop. Of course, I had to carry all the stuff since he was only 10. But he just hiked his brains out that day. There's something about being above tree line and you know, kids. Kids like things that are interesting, always entertaining. It doesn't matter how hard it really is a lot of times, right? Whereas me carrying all the stuff, I knew exactly how hard it was. And it was a really hot day, and I was like just heat stroked out. But so I write these hiking guides. I've written 9 now. I also am a high school English teacher. I teach down on Deer Isle. Before that, I used to teach at Husson, but they didn't pay me enough. So my students all think I'm really weird because I do things like first of all, I'm an English teacher, and they're constantly reminding me that A, this is not history class, and B, this is not science class. But, you know, of course, it's always everything. But I do things like I make them go outside and stare at a clump of moss for 10 minutes and then write a description of it for me. And they just think this is just too weird, right? Plus, they've never probably did anything for 10 minutes in their lives.
How do you do it without the buttons?
I know, exactly. You know, yeah. You know, they want to go outside. There's a boardwalk behind the school that goes back to the elementary school, and there's this really pretty marsh back there. And so we go back there and we walk around on the boardwalk and stuff. And a bunch of the kids, if you let them, they go out there with their headphones on. I'm like, no, wait, stop. No. You're only allowed to use your phone to take pictures of the cool things you see, right? I also do some other writing and editing. I'm going to brag for a minute. This is the new Down East magazine, which I don't think it's actually out yet. There's an interview with me. The editor called me up one day and he goes, "Can I talk to you about waterfalls?"
Huh.
And I'm like, "Okay, sure." So he interviewed me about waterfalls because there's a special spread about waterfalls in the new edition. But then after when we were done talking, I was like, "Let's make sure that you say that my new book's about the 100-mile wilderness." And he goes, "You know what? In August we're doing a spread on the 100-mile wilderness." He goes, "Do you want to write all the hikes for it?" I'm like, "Okay, sure." So, and then yesterday, I drove down to Portland. I'm going to be on 207, so I filmed a segment with Rob Caldwell. And then I decided I had to go for a hike, so I went out to Brownfield, because Brownfield, it's only an hour away. I never get down to the southern part of the state, so I went and I did Burnt Meadow Mountain. I don't know if you guys up here are having a problem with the brown-tailed moths. We have a huge problem in our yard because there's a giant oak tree right next to our house that's like top half of it literally has no leaves anymore. But Burnt Meadow Mountain is almost all oak trees. And I was literally at the beginning of the hike, there were some clouds going over and stuff, so it was kind of spotty with the sun and stuff. And I'm walking along and it's like, oh, it's raining a little bit. And I realized it wasn't raining at all. The trail was just covered with pieces of the leaves, and it was just raining parts of the leaves on me all day.
Did you get rash? Did it get on you?
Because they're right next to our house, earlier in the summer when I attacked a nest, I got a really bad rash. And then since then, just background noise, I probably at any given moment have like maybe 50 of little welts on me. I think I did get some on my back yesterday though. But. All right, so yeah, there's my first group of books. This is the old edition of Hiking Maine. I've done an edition since then, what I have. And then those are my 3 new ones before Hiking 100-Mile Wilderness. I have a funny anecdote about this one. My little sister, who lives in, she used to live in California. She moved back to Cincinnati recently, but she's a book editor. And I'm a terrible copy editor. My ADD comes through when I can't read the same thing 6 times and see grammar anymore, even though I'm an English teacher. And so whenever I finish something, I send it to her and say, "Hey, can you take a look at this for me?" And so I sent her that when they sent me the PDF back, and of course it has all the artwork and everything in it. So it has the cover, and my sister was like, "Wow, that's great." She goes, "Do I know those people?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't. But that picture, it looks so nice and pretty right there, right? Because that's Mount Washington in the background. This was in May. The black flies were among the worst I've ever experienced. So this is on Webster Peak. Yeah, Webster Peak. Get up to the top of the mountain, climb up on the rocks, stop to take a picture, and literally have hundreds of black flies all over me. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I took a bunch of pictures and then ran. And then after I got home, when I got back down, I looked at the pictures I had taken and I realized I framed it wrong. These guys should actually be over there further so you can actually see the mountain, but whatever. I wasn't willing to give up all my blood for the picture. I also run the Wicked Route 25 hiking list. When I was doing the New Hampshire book, I realized everybody in New Hampshire is totally obsessed with hiking lists. You meet somebody in the trail, and the first thing you want to know is what list you're working on, how many lists have you done, how many times have you done the 4,000 footers. I met a guy who was working on his 3rd grid. A grid is when you hike every one of the 4,000 footers. There's 48 of them, so all 48 4,000 footers in each of the 12 months.
Oh my God.
And he was working on his 3rd grid. He needs another hobby. Hiking. Yeah, and then another one of the very first times I met somebody I was going up a trail, a really steep trail, and somebody's running down the trail. Stopped when they got to me and we chatted for a minute, and he was 19 miles into his run for the day. He was going over the Carter Range, which is just constant up and down. Just people in New Hampshire are a little crazy, but So but I'm not a big fan of listing because I like to just hike the hikes that are fun and, interesting rather than, because, like the full 4,000 footer things drove me crazy because, for example, Mount Tecumseh actually just got demoted. They just remeasured it and it's now slightly under 4,000 feet, but it's still on the list. But it was at 4,002 feet or something, and so it's on the list of 4,000 footers. Has a wooded summit. Tons of people hike up it because it's on the list. Right across the valley is Sandwich Dome, which is like 20 feet lower, so it's not on the list, has 3 open summits, and it gets hardly any traffic. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. But I understand that listing can get people out and it gets people interested. So I decided I'd make up a list. And somebody else actually was doing one for hiking Maine. I don't think it's ever actually happened, but he had started planning for it. And so I said, well, I'll do a Wicked Wild one. So it's all the trails in the state that have ladders and lots of exposure and all the things that I don't like. That I take my daughter on them, and she says to me she's never going to hike with me again if you make me do one of these hikes again, and until the next time. But because it's my list and it's the way I make up lists, there's actually like 40 hikes on the list, not 25. But you do 25 and you get the patch. So I've only given away like 5 of these so far. It's a hard list to do because about a third of them are in Baxter, and another maybe third of them are in Acadia. Almost all the ones in Acadia are closed all summer because of the falcons. And then with Baxter, you have to plan so much to get up there to do them all that it's a challenge to do, which is one of the reasons why I kept adding hikes and made it so that way you could make it a more manageable set of a list. But okay, so into the 100-mile wilderness. The hikes that I decided to include here, we're starting in the north and work to the south. I tried to pick ones that maybe a lot of people don't know, rather than like Gulf Haggis or Borestone Mountain, or ones that are really popular and that everybody already knows about. Actually, the ones that I picked, this is probably the one that's the best known. So Rainbow Loop is off the Golden Road. So it's as far north as you can get in the 100-mile wilderness. I remembered my paper today, so I can tell you how long it is. I also realized as I was putting this together, I got about 6 hikes into it, and I realized every single one of them was like 9 miles long. I hadn't put any short ones yet. But there are some short ones. But this one's a little over 9 miles, if you do the whole thing. So the first thing you do is you hike in what used to be a road, except sometimes you can tell it's a road, sometimes it's not. There's a couple of places where you're actually walking through the woods and it's fairly mature forest, but you realize there's road cuts on the side, which I find that and stone walls, things like that kind of history stuff that's in the woods, I find kind of interesting. But then you get to a junction and you go up a ridge, you climb the ridge, and you get to hike past some nice cliffs and things on the way up the ridge. That's my daughter there. My kids used to fight over who would get to be in all the pictures and get their picture in the books more. When I did my first book and I would do events, my daughter would come with me, and she was, I don't know, let's see, she's 17 now, so she must have been about 10. And she would sign the books on pages that her picture was. Yeah, now she's 17 and she's way too cool for that, but she still likes to go hiking with me. But you're climbing up the ridge and you get to the top of the ridge, and then you crest over the ridge and you drop down to, there's 2 ponds. And this is the first pond you come to. Very pretty little pond with, the exposed granite along the edges and everything. And then this is the second pond you come to, which doesn't actually have a trail to it, but it's pretty easy to bush track through that stuff down to the shore. And one of the reasons I included this one is this ridge back here, which if you look on it, you can see some bare rock on that ridge. That's the ridge that the hike then crosses it when we go back up the hill, where you get all your views. You can't really tell in this picture how tall those weeds are, but I have another picture that I didn't include of my daughter, who's 5'8", walking through it, and it's this high on her. And then the trail goes down to Rainbow Lake and ends at Rainbow Lake in a cove. And then you hike back up past the ponds, back up onto the ridge, and then you follow the ridge. And along the ridge, there's also 2 ponds on the top of the ridge. This is the smallest one. It's a pretty little kind of pocket pond sit between like these rock faces. Yes.
Is this southeast of Baxter?
Southwest.
Or southwest of
Southwest.
Baxter? I mean?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay, okay, got it.
And then there's a lot of open ledge stuff like this, with nice views to the south. So across, because this is part of the Nature Conservancy's Debskinnig Wilderness. So over Rainbow Lake and so forth. I think I included a picture. So that's like from the next out overlook looking at Rainbow Lake, which is actually a very large lake. Was it you? Somebody was, okay, never mind. I've talked to so many people in the last 2 days. But of course, whenever you're close to Baxter, what you always want is a view of Katahdin, right? So eventually, when you're hiking along the ridge, you climb up onto this rock. Notice the blaze on the rock. You actually have to climb the rock. And you get up on the rock, and then you can see Baxter. Or see Katahdin. And then from there on to the end of the ridge, you keep getting these different views of the mountains in Baxter. This is the kind of main ledge at the end where it's really this big open area with great views to the south and to the west. But then you can look through the trees and you can see both Katahdin and Mount OJI, which they need to change the name of. It needs to be. It looks like it's what, JMII or something. Or UMII. And then from that ledge, the trail drops really steeply down through this really pretty forest. Lots of big tall trees and lots of moss. And eventually you drop down and you come to Horse Race Pond, which is a long, narrow pond with this ridge on the other side, which you can see has a lot of open granite ledging on it.
What did you say the name is?
Horse Race.
Horse Race Pond?
Yes. There's actually, you were asking where exactly this is. On the Penobscot River, there's Horse Race Rapids, or falls. And that's where the stream that flows out of this lake goes into the river. And I think it's like 5 miles from Abel Bridge, not that far.
It was about where the old suspension bridge was, wasn't it?
You know, I don't know exactly where that was, but it was in that neighborhood, because I know it was much further west than where the trail was.
I was thinking it was over the Horse Race Rapids, but I'm not sure.
I don't know for sure either. I have a book at home that has a picture on it, but I don't have it in my back pocket. What I didn't get a picture of, I do this. I have literally 26,000 photographs on my computer's hard drive. But inevitably, when I'm putting a book or my description together, there'll be a specific thing I remember seeing that I want to put in the picture of. And of course, that's the picture I don't have. When the trail follows along almost the entire length of the pond, and there's, as you can see a little bit of it here, there's these slabs of granite that are either just below the surface or just above the surface of the water. It's a great place for swimming because you can get onto those rocks to get out into the deeper water and then, sit on the rocks after you're done swimming. But along the shore, there's these big giant, like cabin-sized boulders, and the trail winds between those boulders. And there's 2 campsites at the end of the pond. It's a very pretty spot. My wife actually did her first solo backpacking trip there. All right, now we're going to go to Rainbow Stream on the other side of Rainbow Lake. I think, I don't want to say this definitively, but if you look at the map, there's the trailhead here where the Appalachian Trail crosses Rainbow Stream, or Pollywog Stream, I mean. And then Namakatta Wilderness Camps is right here, and there's another trailhead for the next hike we're going to do is right there. And this the road continues up past this spot, and it doesn't go as far as maybe it does, but about here the road ends that you can drive on it. And I also did a hike that goes to these 2 ponds and a pond up here. Those 3 trailheads, I think, are the most remote trailheads in the state. The one up here is almost 30 miles from the nearest paved road, from the Joe Marion Gate. Wow. So it's out there. But Rainbow Stream, so you're following the Appalachian Trail north for a couple of miles from that road crossing. And it just drops down through the woods, and it's just waterfall after waterfall for the whole 2 miles. It's just a really pretty stretch of street.
If you want to camp, what do you have to do to get one of those sites? Is it you just go
You just go.
and just hope nobody's there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like my wife went, and it was on a weekend, and it was really pretty. It was, I think, in July, and she said there wasn't anybody at the other site. And the 2 sites are kind of far apart, because the one is on the side that the picture was taken on. The other one, you have to go over the outlet stream and walk around a little bit around the side of the pond. They're pretty isolated from each other. A lot of the waterfalls along the stretch of Rainbow Stream are, I mean, you see, none of them are probably more than 10 or 15 feet high. But like I said, there's just tons of them. A lot of them are slides like this, or there's a lot of the bedrock, you know, and the water likes to find the joint cracks and go down those. I notice this is in the fall, and the water level's pretty high. I've found that in the streams, Pollywog Stream and Rainbow Stream and a couple of the other streams up in the north end of Namankata, in the fall the water levels are always really pretty high, really good for waterfalls, which is kind of surprising. You would think by the late summer they would be really low and at a trickle. But usually I have not found that to be the case. Now it's not, you know, like the spring flood. I didn't include Pollywog Falls in here, but I have a picture of Pollywog taken in May, and the waterfall is probably 100 feet wide, and it's just this raging wall of water. And then I have a picture from it in October, and it's 2 distinct waterfalls, but it's still good flow, right? But I mean, it's nothing like in the spring flood. But I like this one because you get a bonus waterfall because there's a brook that comes into the stream there, and they both have a waterfall together. And then this is the last waterfall, and above this waterfall, Rainbow Stream goes through this large marshy area, and then it goes back into the woods, and then above that is the lean-to, and then above the lean-to there's the 2 dead waters before you get to the dam. To get to the dead waters, there's a different trail that you can get to. The 2 trails connect. I found out it's not on anybody's maps except mine, but if you walk behind this lean-to, there's a trail that just goes straight over, and it runs into this other trail that you can then take up to the dead waters.
Yeah, that was actually the old road they used building the dam originally.
Oh, is that what it was for?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, because when you hike up to hike along the dead waters, you're constantly going off and on of what appears to be old logging roads.
Yeah.
And that's the road that they use for the dam.
Yeah.
Somebody told me when I was in Greenville that they just rebuilt the dam, and they built a new road in from the Golden Road to
They
the
did.
dam.
I haven't found it yet, but I'm gonna.
Yeah, I've said that sounds interesting because it would be a pretty walk and to get to the dam that way. When my wife and I did the main section of the Appalachian Trail, when we didn't camp here, but when we stopped here for lunch, the roof was crushed because this is in a stand of red pines, and this big red pine about this big around was laying right on top of the lean-to.
That was the pine that had the outlet in it.
Yes.
That was the pine that
Had an outlet in it.
Yeah, it's got an electric switch in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a gag. Somebody was complaining that there was no place to plug in the hair dryer. Somebody who was on a maintenance trip with MATC. And so next trip in, somebody put that stupid outlet in.
Well, if you put it at Pottawajo, I might have believed that it was real.
Yeah.
You can plug it in, but you can't charge anything.
So the Debskinning Backcountry Loop, there's 2 distinct loops. And the East Loop, I think more people know about, and it's been there longer. The West Loop is actually somewhat longer, because it is See, it's almost 9. I said I would do 9-mile hikes. It's 8.9 miles.
That's less.
It's slightly under, yeah. Because I didn't do any of the, because there's actually 2 trails that go up to Gold Pond off of it, and I didn't map those. So if I'd have done that, it would have been over. It might have been 10. The beginning of this hike, the first thing you have to do is go to, you can kind of see right here, right there, there's stairs that go down to the stream, and then you have to cross, it's Rainbow Stream, so you have to cross Rainbow Stream and go on. And I was gonna do that one day. I was down there in May, and I said, why don't you go check it out? I wanna go do this one early. Yeah, the water was like up to that tree, and you can see it's right in a cut bank, so that's the deepest part of the stream, right where you need to step in. And it was, you know, it had like standing waves in it, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go do a different hike today. So if you go do this one, you have to plan. This one you can't do early in the year because it's not gonna be safe to get across the water. And I came back, this is like in July, and I came back with my daughter, and I warned her how we were gonna get all wet going across the stream, and you know, the water's like this deep.
Now, which end is this of the trail? Is this the west end?
This is the west end.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, this trailhead is off of the road that goes from Wadleigh Pond Road, drops down to
Yeah.
the Namakato Wilderness Camp.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
And there's a regular, you know, state maintained trailhead and everything there. So this is a classic lollipop hike, right? You have to hike about a mile in and then you do a loop. So the next couple of pictures are all from the hike in part, which is kind of cool because you do a little bit of climbing, but mostly you're just going along through the woods, and there's all these jumbles of rocks that you're hiking over and around. And then you come to this this ledge, and about where my daughter is, up on the top of the ledge, it's open, and you get a nice view of the lake and of the Sunderbutt Mountain across the lake. And then you go past some cliffs. And then you come to the lollipop or the circle part of the trail. And again, the first couple of miles of that, you spend a lot of time going next to these cliffs. And I kept waiting for the trail to go up on top of one of these ledges and maybe you'd get a view, but evidently none of them have a view, so the trail just stays down and wanders between them. But it's kind of cool walking, you know, it's kind of like walking down a corridor in a couple of places where it comes up on both sides. So I included this picture because my daughter is standing under a spot where the cliff actually overhangs. So she's like standing in a little room there. And of course she's doing something goofy. I would always, you know, when she hikes with me, I'll see something that I want to get a picture of, but it's, you know, so I'll take the picture, but then I also want a picture with a hiker in it. A lot of times, you know, for the books and stuff, having a hiker in it is good because you can sense a scale and everything. It's just nice. Plus I think people like to see people, even if they're looking at the wilderness. They're not like me in that way. So I tell her, I make her go and redo things. Like, go stand there, or go re-hike that, or wait here until I get it right. And I'm always getting. So then she always has to act out, and she does these goofy poses and everything. And I'm like, oh my God. So I have all these pictures of her being goofy that for years I didn't use. And so it's gotten to the point since she's 17 now, and she still does it. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm just going to use them. So there's a picture in the book of her skipping through the Hermitage, and then her, you know, with her arms up doing something goofy there under the cliff. And I guess she's not embarrassed about it anymore, so whatever. And then there's more ledges, and eventually you're going to get when you come to 8th. Dubskinnick Pond, which is interesting. There's 8 in the chain, and it's one of the only chain of lakes I know of in Maine where they call some of them ponds and some of them lakes. Usually it's all one or the other, and half the time that means the name's really not appropriate. But in this one they use both. So you come to 8th Pond, which is a pretty pond, marshy edges, some rocks that come down to it, great moose habitat. Saw lots of moose sign when I was there, things they've been eating on, and moose scatting tracks and stuff. But of course I didn't see a moose. I have this whole thing with my kids about why the moose are never in the place they're supposed to be. Because they often aren't. I think part of it is, you know, you go for a hike, it takes 2 hours to get from my house to the trailhead for this. So even if we get up early in the morning and you can get my daughter out of bed before like 8 o'clock, which is a work, you know, you're not going to get to the trailhead before 8 or 9, even if you really get a nice early start. And it's too late then to see the moose in the morning. And then the trail goes past another beaver flowage, which is kind of long, narrow, like it almost probably has more water in it than it does. And then you cross over the outlet stream before it drops down to 7, and then you climb up onto these ledges that run for a couple of miles. And in the middle of that is where you turn and drop down to 7. So on the loop, you don't actually cross the most open part of the ledges with the best views. That's on the other half of the loop. But you get some partial views, especially when you're at the top of this section where you're descending. It's much steeper than it looks in that picture. It's pretty steep going down towards 7 off of the ridge. And then you get the 7th, where you can stand on that rock is the best way to see the pond. And every time I've been there, there's something in the pond to see, whether it's different kinds of ducks or the beaver active or muskrats or whatever. I think that the only reason that pond exists is because of the beaver, because after this rock you drop down and you cross the outlet stream and there's a big beaver dam right there. I think it would be basically grass now if it wasn't for the beavers. And then you're about a mile through the woods and you come to 6th, which is the first one that actually looks like a lake. This one's popular with the people who are staying down at the Chewonki-owned camps on 4. They hike up here to go fishing. In fact, if you look in this picture,
Oh, yeah.
those are both guys in their little, you know, floaty things that they fish in. And in fact, the reason she's sitting near this open area continues around to a much bigger open area where they usually have boats that they keep there and stuff. And there's actually, this day, there were several people who were sitting there having lunch, so we just went over this side. But it's a pretty pond. Usually there's loons in it. One of the hikes I did doing the other side of the loop, there's now a campsite too on this pond, which is fairly new. It's around on the other side. Near where the campsite is, I was hiking along one day, and I just got that feeling, you know, sometimes you're walking in the woods, you get that feeling somebody's looking at you. And I've learned to pay attention to that, right? I always tell my students, you know, there's things that you know that you don't know that you know. You know, like you know what, your body knows what time it is, because if you're like me, when I have to get up for school, I have to get up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
I can't believe I get up at 5 in the morning. I have to get up at 5. Well, on Saturdays, I still wake up at 5 o'clock. So obviously I know what time it is, right? So when you're walking in the woods and you feel like somebody's looking at you, you better trust that, because somebody's probably looking at you. Now it might just be a squirrel or something, but take the time to look. So I was walking around and I got that prickly feeling. I knew somebody was looking at me, so I stopped and I listened, didn't hear anything. I started looking around and I realized off in the woods about 100 feet off the trail, there's a cow moose nursing her calf. You know, which if I had ignored that feeling and just kept walking, I never would have seen them. I also had an encounter with a bear on Trout Brook Mountain, the same thing, but that's in Baxter, so we won't talk about that. So from 6, you drop down to Namakata Lake, and the reason I included this picture is because you go past this, down this little gorge, and there's that big rock face there, and there's a really good spring at the base of those rocks. And I know, for legal reasons, I have to tell you, any water you drink in the woods, you have to treat. But I will tell you that when my wife and I did the AT, it was a really dry summer, and when we got to Monson, my pump clogged up.
Oh,
We went into the 100-mile wilderness without a pump. We just drank water out of the springs the whole way. There's lots of springs in the 100-mile wilderness, and I lived. So my daughter knows that story, right? So when we got to the spring, she's like, "Can we drink that?" And it was like, you know, this is a trail that I don't think that many people do. It's not like there's any upstream where it's going to get contaminated. And the water was like making your teeth hurt cold. I'm like, filled our water bottle up and we drank it. So, and then you get down to the lake, and the trail goes along the lake for almost 2 miles. And it's not like right on the water like my daughter is walking. It's, you know, you're in a few feet. But as you're walking along, you'll get to a spot where you realize there's a beach. And you just step across the rocks in the weeds onto the beach. And my daughter is a fish, and so we had to stop at the beach. And so she jumped in the water, and you get a nice view of Nesundabut Mountain on the other side.
Yeah, my favorite one.
Yeah, she will swim anywhere. She swam we were down, I forget if it was on Petite Manant or Great Wasp, but it was one of those two trails. And it was like in early May. And it was a nice sunny day, but it was only like 60 degrees. It wasn't even like it was hot. And we got to this really nice gravel beach. In the water she went. And she's like, "Come, yeah, this is great. You need to come in." So, I take my shoes and my socks off. I'm like a cat. I don't like to get wet much. But I took my shoes and my socks on. I walked in, got the water up to about here, and realized my feet were turning blue because it was so cold. But she doesn't care.
Are you on the south side of Nesundabut here? Or on Namakana Lake?
Yeah, on the North Shore.
North, this is north?
North, yeah.
Wow.
The opposite from the AT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't realize there were beaches on that side.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's, like where the lean-to is on the other side, there's a fairly good beach near
nice
there.
beaches on the.
Yeah, yeah.
on the-
Which, that's actually the next hike. So, yeah. So there's two ways to do the Nesundabut Mountain. There's the average day hike way where you do it from the north where it crosses Wadleigh Pond Road. And it's like, I wrote this down too. It is 2.4 miles with 647 feet of climbing out and back. Really easy hike, great for the kids. But of course, I had to do it from the south just to do it.
Yeah.
And that's 9.4 miles with 2,200 feet of climbing.
Oh, I don't like that one.
But it's a great hike. And obviously I had done it when we backpacked through there, but I had never day hiked it until I did this book. And all I remember about it when we backpacked, because we were doing 25-mile days at that point, and I just remember getting to the bottom of the lake thinking, I got a couple more miles to the lean-to, we're good for the day. And then you go up and over these rocky headlands, and I just cussing under my breath, and what hikers call them PUDs, pointless up and down.
Yeah.
Well, they're not really pointless because you can't take the trail along the shore because it drops straight into the water. But just not loving it. And so when I day hiked it, I was like, this is great trail. This is really pretty going this way. I think that was the same day. There's a spring along the AT down here somewhere. And I literally walked right past the spring and didn't even notice it. I was like, 15 miles into the day, I had tunnel vision to get to the end. And
Woodrat Spring, probably.
yes.
Yeah. We got a project there this summer.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So the day I did it for mapping it for the book was in the fall, as you can see from the
Very blustery.
trees, and it was really windy.
Wow.
In the woods, it was maybe 60 degrees. Standing there to take that picture, I think it was below freezing. But yeah, this was definitely a day for hiking and not paddling. But that's in the Nesundabut way back there, which is where we're going. See, this is that up and down of the headlands. But when you get to the top of each of the little headlands, you get these nice views of the lake, and you can see how far up you come in that little bit. But then you drop down the last one, and you go past where the spring is, which is the spring is just in off of the shore of the lake. And it's kind of this not particularly attractive swampy area, but the water then flows out towards the lake, and it kind of disappears into the gravel. And if you go out to where you think it ought to be and dig a hole in the gravel, it wells up and fills like a basin with this cold, clean water. It's great. The day we were backpacking, I made one of those bowls and then stuck my head in it. But past the lean-to, which is a few tenths of a mile beyond where the spring is, Past there, you immediately, that's a new lean-to, isn't it?
Pardon?
That's a new lean-to, do you know?
Relatively.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was definitely not the same lean-to when I was there. And the area around it was a lot less muddy than when we were there. Cause that was, we took when we did the section, we took a tent, cause we didn't know if we were always gonna be at a lean-to, or if the lean-tos might be crowded or whatever. And a lot of times my wife would wanna sleep in the tent since we had it, because you have a little more privacy and stuff. So we were sleeping in the tent, and we had the fly halfway on. And mice would, all night, would run up the tent, get to the top of the tent, and go whoosh, and slide down the fly. And then
Bungee mice.
climb back up, whoosh, back down the, it was like it was a game for 'em or something. But beyond the lean-to, you go past up, there's all these cliffs and rock faces that you climb and then cross in the woods that are impossible, these, at my level of photographic expertise, to get a good picture of, because they're in the woods and the way they are, but it's really pretty hike. And then when you get to the top of the ridge, there is the world's largest natural cairn. Because the trail gets to the top of the ridge and like makes a right-hand turn at this big natural cairn. So I decided that, you know, somebody back in the day made that for us. And then the trail, the Sunderbutt Mountain has 3 distinct summits. And I believe the middle one is actually the highest, but it's only the north one that the AT goes over. And it comes up into the valley between the north one and the next one over, and there's this notch between them that's just really pretty. And as you're coming up to it, you go past a whole bunch of cliffs, you know, where you're in the woods, so the cliffs are kind of screened by the trees like this. And then you go up between some cliffs, and there's like this open valley that strikes me as being a lot of like hiking more out west than in Maine. With all these hardwoods and ferns on the floor, and then you get past that and you climb a little rock face, and then you're like a tenth of a mile from the summit. It's really pretty. And then when you get to the summit and you take a little side trail out, then you get the great view of Katahdin, which you have to do this hike either like in May or in the fall, because you have to get snow on Katahdin.
It's surprising how many thru hikers don't know that's there. They just blow right on.
Yeah, they're just doing miles at that point. Although it's interesting, when my wife and I did the section, we started in the middle of July and we did 26 days. So we finished like the second weekend in August. And we were with a group that we picked up way down somewhere in the middle of the state. They were like the leading edge of the thru hikers for that season.
Yeah.
And by the time they got, we would leapfrog them, because like when they got to Shaw's and Monson, they all stayed there for 2 days, and we didn't take any days off, so we just kept going. Then they would catch up with us, and we did that several times across the state. They slowed down in the wilderness, and they started hiking more at our pace, because a couple of them said, I don't know if I'm ready to be done yet. You know, so, but I think a lot of people, especially maybe more in the pack where they're fighting to get for time and stuff, yeah, they just, that single-minded, get to the end of the trail and not do any side things. Which I remember like when we were at Spalding Mountain way down in Carabasset Valley, there's a side trail from Spalding Mountain that goes up Mount Abraham. And I didn't do it. Because I was like, nope, it's not on the trail. Can't burn any extra energy. To be fair to myself, when we did the trail, I had 5 kidney stone attacks. Every time we would stop, when you cross the Kennebec River, I'm gonna brain cramp. What's the town? Caratunk. In Caratunk, we have a friend that at the time ran one of the inns there, and said, come stay with us. So we stayed there for the night, had a kidney stone attack while we were there. In Carabasset Valley, we stayed in a hostel, had a kidney stone attack at the hostel. So when I got done, the doctor told me, well, this makes perfect sense, because the kidney stone settles out at night, especially if you're nice and relaxed, and then you have an attack, and it doesn't. But it must have been big enough; it wasn't easy to pass. So then you get up the next day and start walking, and you bounce it, and it pops back up into the kidney, and this kept happening over and over again until we camped at East Chairback Pond, and I got up in the morning and I could just tell it was going to happen again. And I told my wife, and I realized from experience that if I just keep walking, and when it starts to hurt, it's going to stop. Whereas if I stop because it hurts, then it's going to get worse. So I just told her, I said, I'm just going to go. I'll see you at the end of the day, maybe. And I passed the kidney stone in Gulf Haggis. So yeah, that became my trail name, was Kidney Stone. All right. So after I got to this part, putting the slideshow together, I realized every single hike I included here was like 9 miles or more. So I needed to go for a short one. So we did Musquash Ledges, which is part of the Giant Circle Trail, which I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a trail that connects, the Appalachian Trail runs here, and it is a loop that goes out like this and uses the Appalachian Trail. I didn't check, I think it's about 40 miles, 35 miles, somewhere in that neighborhood for the whole loop. Depending on how you do it, it can be different lengths, because when you go through the Turtle Ridge area, depending which way you go, you can shorten it by a mile or two. And they've built campsites and lean-tos along it. It's a great little loop to do like in 3 days or 4 days if you want to do it really leisurely. Or I met some people doing what I now call the Greater Circle. When you reconnected to the Appalachian Trail near Pollywog Falls at Crescent Pond, and then you would turn south on the Appalachian Trail and go over into Sunderbutt Mountain for the Great Circle. What they did is they went north, and then when they got down to the road, they walked down the road that half a mile and did the Debskenig Loop, and then went out the other side of that, and then did the road walk for 2 miles back to the Appalachian Trail and connected to the Appalachian Trail that way.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
Aislinn Snarnaki had posted a video on the Musquash Trail, I think, some years ago when she was posting videos with the Bangor Daily.
Did she?
Yeah, I think she did that one.
When for years, when she was like fairly new at this, whenever I would have something new or a book come by, I'd let her know, and she and I would go on a hike, and she would post, a nice article about my book and everything. For the last couple of years now that she's got like 3 books in a row, she won't return my emails. I don't know. It might. Maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know for sure, but.
Oh,
Yeah, Aislinn Sarnacki writes for the BD.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah. I have one of her books,
Yeah, in fact, we went on a hike together in Bath one time, and she asked me all about writing guides, because she was thinking about writing a guide, and she was asking me for advice. And I gave her all this interesting, what I thought was helpful advice about, how to approach it and finding your own kind of niche, so that you don't directly compete with me and with the AMC guide or whatever. It is what it is. But Musquash Ledges is a part of the Giant Circle, so it didn't exist until they built the Giant Circle Trail. And you start at what they call the Katahdin View Trailhead, which is called the Katahdin View Trailhead because there's a gargantuan boulder next to the road. And so you're driving up the hill from the big 3-way intersection at the southern end of the Namakatta land, which now the Namakatta land has street signs at all of the roads. It's so easy now to give directions.
Yeah.
Which, because like finding Pollywog Falls used to be kind of sketchy to tell people how to do it. Now there's a street sign there. But at any rate, so you're going up the hill on what in the state land they call it the Penobscot Pond Road. If you get over in the AMC land, it has a different name, which the state likes to do that, where things like when you're hiking, for giving directions on trails and stuff, a lot of times their trail names are the name of where you're going. So the same trail will have different names at each end, which can be kind of confusing. But so you go about a mile up from that intersection, and you see this gargantuan boulder sitting next to the road, and right past the boulder is a parking area. You pull into the parking area, you get out of your car and turn around and look at the boulder, and you realize Katahdin's right there. It's got a great view of Katahdin, you know, because where the road, the opening that the road makes gives you this nice view. And if you go on the same side of the road that the parking area is on, the trail goes up Wadleigh Mountain, which is a nice hike. If you go the other way, it drops down to Musquash Brook, and you come out along the brook, you come down and there's all these boulders that you're winding between with moss all over them. It's really pretty. And then you come to this pool. You can see this is early in the year because that's ice. And the ledge, the water's coming down off the ledges. Those ledges continue upstream for almost a half a mile. And nowhere in it is it like an actual waterfall, and it's not really, really steep, but it's just goes on, and it's just really pretty. And a lot of the trail is actually on the rock, on the ledges. So if you do it when the water's really high, you're gonna get your feet wet. You know, it goes out onto the ledges, then it'll go into the woods for a minute, and then it'll come back out onto the ledges. It's just a fun little hike, and the whole loop is only a mile long.
Are all of these trails marked that you're showing?
Yes.
I mean, they all have blazes, okay.
Yes. Yeah, I avoid doing bushwhacks, not personally, but for my guides, because I don't want to be responsible for somebody trying to do a bushwhack if they're not really, you know, up for it.
So
Yeah,
no
no, my
compass
waterfall-
required, in other words?
So
Or
what?
no compass required as far as?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. I think my waterfall book has 2 bushwhacks in it. The 100-mile wilderness book also has 2 bushwhacks in it. But in this one, both of them are following streams. I don't know how you can get lost following a stream, because all you have to do is walk up the stream to a waterfall and then walk back. I figure that's okay. But yeah, I'm not going to send anybody on a wild goose chase, because like for a long time, when you hike Barren Mountain, you park at the end of Otter Pond Road, and when I first did it, you literally had to bushwhack from there over to the AT on the stream. Then they built the trail that goes up the hill. Well, now they've built a new trail that does go straight over to the stream, so you can make it a loop.
Oh.
And when I did the waterfall book, the hike that I did was to go up and then down along the stream. Well, then you had to go back. And I realized that when you get to that bottom, you're like 1/10 of a mile from where you were before, but it's straight through the woods. And I'm like, I am not going to tell anybody to do that, because they're going to go this way, and then, you know, they'll find 3 weeks later. But now they put a trail in there, so you can do that. But yeah, I'm not going to make you do anything that requires it.
The other problem with doing that too was there were several logging roads that came in there. If you didn't hit the right one, you couldn't walk for quite a
Yes,
while.
because where the end of the road used to not be the end of the road. It used to turn towards the stream and continue around, yeah. All right, so back to Musquash Ledges. So
Down that stream.
you can see the water just kind of slides over the ledges, and then a lot of times it'll find a joint seam, and then it'll run along that for a little while. And
Can you slide there? Is it safe to, have you tried it?
I have not tried it.
Has your daughter tried it?
You know, I don't think she's been here with me. Otherwise, she probably would have. I have another story
It
about it.
looks like the ledge falls in Baxter.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah.
On my various backpacking adventures with my son, with hiking with little kids, you learn their energy use and their idea of how things go is very different from adults. And sometimes, especially on the first day of a trip, you kind of forget this, right? You know, like when you go up to Baxter, the time when we did over Trout Brook Mountain and then we were going over to South Branch Pond, they gave us so much runaround. The ranger at the gate was not going to let us in because she said what the trip I had planned was too hard, and that I really know what I was doing. And we literally were at the gate for like 45 minutes trying to convince her that yes, I knew exactly what I was doing. I write books about this stuff. My son can handle it. We're good, right? But then we had to stop at Trout Brook Campground and sign in there, and we were leaving our car at South Branch. We had to check in there, and then we had to drive back to the trailhead with our friend to get dropped off. So by the time we left home like at 5 in the morning, by the time we got to the trailhead, it was like 11 o'clock. And, you know, I'm all anxious and ready to go at that point. But when I forget my son, who's 9, he's done for the day. You know, all that driving around in the car is exhausting for the little kids, right? So climbing Trout Brook Mountain, which is not a huge mountain, but it's a pretty steep climb, pretty steady climb, with lots of fake outs, which is important when you're a 9-year-old kid who thinks you're about to get to the top. No matter how many times Dad tells you no, you're at the top when you're at the top. He was just miserable all day. So we go over Trout Brook Mountain, and I figured, okay, now we're going downhill. He'll be in a better mood. No, his mood did not get better that day. We get to the end. We stayed at Middle Fowler Pond, and which is a beautiful campsite. Where the outlet stream is there's a big slide. He's like, this is great, so he's going to get in. He starts sliding down the slide over and over again. He's allergic to chlorophyll, I think, because when he was a kid and like he would go outside and play basketball or soccer, or basketball, you don't play basketball in the grass, baseball or soccer or whatever, and he would get grass stain on him, he would get like this nasty hives from it. And you give him a shot of, give him some Benadryl and he's fine, right? But you can't like buy that kind of Benadryl anymore, evidently. They have this other stuff that doesn't do anything. But I didn't think about taking it on the backpacking trip. A lot of the slide there had stuff on it, green stuff on it. So thinking about it, he's in a great mood. Things are good, right? We have a nice campfire, go to bed. Had a big thunderstorm overnight that didn't rain on us, but we got to see the flashes of lightning over the Traveler. It was just gorgeous. Get up the next morning, he is completely covered with these giant welts like this big around, and they're like sticking up. They're white on the top and screaming red around them, and he's just crying and he's miserable. And he says, "I can't walk." And I'm like, you don't have any choice. Yeah, so me and ledges. I think I'm scarred by that experience. But no, these, if anything, these are too shallow to be good slides. And there's not that much water going over them. Ledge Falls and Baxter Head that flows higher and pushes you more. And there's more of the ledges. And more. And then this is a little waterfall at the top, and above that, then the trail just follows through the woods along the stream where it's flat, and then you come to an intersection, turn right, and head back to the trailhead. And like I said, the whole loop is a mile long. I have tons of pictures of flowers, but when I do slideshows, I almost never include them. And I was looking through my pictures of this one, and I said, well, that's an especially nice one. I'm just going to throw that in anyway. When I go hiking with my wife, I get anywhere we're going twice as fast as she does. Now, partly it's because I walk faster than she does. But it's also because she stops and takes a picture of every flower, every mushroom, every cool tree, everything she sees is interesting. She stops and takes a picture of, which is great, right? She's hiking the way she wants to do it. But a lot of times, especially early in the year when I go out by myself, I always have to take pictures of all the flowers I see so I can like text her and say, look, they're blooming now.
Is this Trillium?
Yeah. Yeah. It has lots of names. Red Trillium, Blood Trillium, or Wake Robin. I've heard a rumor that a lot of people want to go to Tumbledown Dick Falls because they just like the name. It's one of the bigger waterfalls in this part of the state. And it's also most of the other well-known waterfalls like Little Wilson Falls and Indian Falls and Big Wilson Falls. Those are all slate gorges. Tumbledown Dick is granite. There's the northern part of the 100 Mile Wilderness is granite bedrock that's part of the Pluton that Katahdin is. And then, then the southern part is all the slate. And then somewhere around where Tumbledown Dick Falls, it all gets mushed together. Because I swear the rock at the top of this waterfall looks like slate, but if you look at the gorge when you're down below the waterfall, it's clearly granite. But there's two ways to do it. You can start at the Turtle Ridge trailhead, and the trail's across the road from that parking lot, or you can start where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Wadleigh Brook Road.
Yeah, and you used to be able to drive most of the way to it. Only there was a woods road that went to the bridge of the.
Yes, and I've
upstream.
never figured out where that road comes out.
Well, I don't know where it comes out, but it's been closed off by the state. You can't drive
Oh,
to it.
because before either of those, because most of this is a side trail off of the Appalachian Trail.
Right.
And then this is the trail that the state built that already existed down to those ponds, and then they just continued it onto the waterfall. And I knew that this waterfall existed. I knew it was a big waterfall, but at the time this was like 25 years ago, there was no trail to it. And I spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out how to get to it. And there's a logging road that heads down in the right direction, but it's like 4 miles from this trailhead. It's over here, and it like goes that way. And you could drive part way down it. It was one of those where, you know, you're scraping the bushes on the side of your car the whole time. But you could drive down it a mile or two at the time. And the last time I did that, then there's a parking lot there now and a gate. And I assumed that that's the road that eventually crosses. But
Well,
where the road,
there's a bridge that it crosses over Tumbledown Stream.
yeah,
But, and you used to be able to drive to that bridge, fairly easily the times I've done it, but now it's gated off miles back from.
yeah. Because when you get to, if you hike down from Turtle Ridge, it's about 4 miles down, and then the trail seems to end at a really nice logging road, and there's a really nice maintained bridge, so it's clearly a road that they still use. And then you cross that bridge, and then you're like 0.2 miles from the waterfall there. But yeah, I've never found a good way to get to either ends of that road. But clearly it goes somewhere because it's maintained. But so for sticking with trying to do easier hikes here, I did the hiking it in from the Appalachian Trail for this. So you hike along the brook there where it comes out of Namakata Lake. And that stream is really pretty, lots of white water, no waterfalls as such, but lots of white water, and it's just a pretty walk through the woods. And then you turn off on the side trail and you hike up to Tumbledown Dick Falls, and you go past, there's a side trail that drops down the gorge, and if you go past it, you have to climb a little bit, and then you'll come to the top of the waterfall. And so that's the top of the waterfall there looking down. You can't really see the falls. But see, that doesn't look like granite to me. But the state says the bedrock is granite. But I don't think that, I'm not so sure that's granite. I think it might be a complicated thing where there's different things going on here. But when you go down to the bottom, so that's the waterfall, and it's a good 60 feet. It's a pretty high waterfall. I wanted to get a shot where this tree wasn't blocking part of the waterfall, which I never did find a way to get rid of that tree and still get the whole waterfall, or get rid of trees and get the whole waterfall. But I wanted to also get all these cliffs that are here in the picture. So there's this big flat area at the bottom that's all these rocks like this big, jumbled around with weeds and bushes growing between them and stuff. So it's kind of a pain in the butt to walk around it. But if you take your time, right, you can do it. And I was doing that, and I got to this one spot, right, to step over a rock, and I lift my foot up to step over the rock, and I get my foot, I'm just about to step down, and I hear this clack, clack, clack sound, and I'm like, what the heck? And I look down, and I'm about to step on a beaver. So I backed up, and the beaver took off into the water, you know, and got into the pool at the bottom there and slapped his tail at me and showed me he wasn't happy with me. But I did get that picture. And no beavers were harmed. There are certain places in the 100-mile wilderness that are really, really hard to get to. Rainbow Mountain, which I did not include in the book, because you cannot day hike it in under 20 miles. It just can't be done because of where it is. It's like halfway along Rainbow Lake, there's a side trail that goes up to the mountain. Pottawatomie Ridge is also almost that remote. If you hike in on the Appalachian Trail from where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Joe Mary Road, it's 16 miles in and out. If you do it from the north side where you would get the same way you went in to do Tumbledown Dick Falls and just keep going, it's more than that. I think it's more like 19 or 18. But I was determined to find a way up the ridge because people hike it, because I've seen pictures from the top of it. Well, evidently people that stay at one of the camps on the Joe Mary Lakes, you boat across the lake to a sand beach, and then you just walk up the ridge. But I was determined to find a way, and I realized that from Antlers Camp, there appears to be a road that continues over to Cooper Brook, and I couldn't tell if it was a road or if it was a snowmobile trail, but at any rate, something went from Antlers Camp over to Cooper Brook. So I figured I'll get as close to Cooper Brook as I can, walk the rest of the way, wade across the brook, and then the Appalachian Trail will be right on the other side of the brook. So I go down to Antlers Camp, and the road indeed does continue, except the road for the first, like, 0.2 of a mile isn't made out of gravel or dirt. It's made out of rocks about this big. Which, I mean, you know, if you go slow, it's not a big deal, but oh my God, you're just like this, and you feel like you're about to slide down the side of the hill. But then the road gets pretty good for another mile or so, and you get to a spot where there's an obvious place where you can park and turn around, but I couldn't do that. I had to keep going where it goes back into the woods and becomes a very narrow 2-track where, you know, it's scraping on the sides and the stuff in the middle is about this high, and there's lots of rocks in it that you have to be really careful, and half of them you can't see because of all the stuff growing in it, because nobody goes down here, because evidently it really is a snowmobile trail. And I realized after I get down this like 1/10 of a mile that because of the rocks, there's absolutely no way I can turn around or back up, because you can't safely back up because I can't see what I'm doing for the rocks and stuff. I have absolutely no choice except to try to keep going, and realizing that maybe I didn't make the best choice in the world. And I get down to a spot where it makes a right-hand turn, and I know that the brook is right there because I can hear it. And there's this kind of open ledge of rock that's about this big around that slopes way down, and I'm like, you know, I think if I do this, maybe I can turn around here. You know, it was one of those things where you turn around and half the time you're looking at the sky. And so I backed the car in there and I parked it there, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't scrape the bottom on anything, maybe I'll live. And I look out my driver's window and I realize there's a nice bridge across Cooper Brook right there. So evidently this is a snowmobile trail, and so they have a nice bridge. So I get out, I walk across the bridge, and there's the Appalachian Trail. I didn't have to get my feet wet. And by doing it that way, I made it an 8-mile hike instead of a 16-mile hike. And it's a pretty section of trail. The first thing you do is the trail leaves Cooper Brook right past where that road is, and it cuts over to Mud Pond. And you have to cross the Mud Pond outlet stream. You actually have to cross it twice because there's an island right there at the kind of the head of the pond. This actually is the outlet, not the pond. The pond is around the corner there. And like I said, I'm kind of like a cat, so if I have to do a stream crossing, I'm always going to try to find a way to do it without getting my feet wet. And I actually did. This is the official crossing of the first section. You can see there's a rope there across the stream for you to hang on to while you walk through the uneven rocks on the floor of the stream. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I went upstream and I found a log jam right at the head of where the outlet kind of becomes the brook. And went across that, and then you get on the island. I walked over, same thing, you know, you can't get across it without getting your feet wet. So I walked downstream there, and in like 100 feet, I found another log jam that I could go across. So I was able to do it without getting my feet wet. Now, who knows if those log jams are still there, or whether they washed out this spring. But it's not very far across, and the water's really not that deep. But and then you do some typical Maine 100-mile wilderness Appalachian Trail hiking where it's a pretty walk through some nice woods. The trail is, you know, all roots and rocks held together by mud. And then you come to Antlers Campground, which at some point in the past I think actually was a campground, if I'm not mistaken. But now it's just this kind of open grove of red pines that you can just camp wherever you want in it. And there's actually a little beach there too, but it's a really pretty spot. So if you do this hike, you'll come to a spot where the trail forks, and the one fork stays along the lake and goes into the campground, and the other one, the Appalachian Trail, just goes around it and past it. So it's possible to go right past it and kind of miss it. And then you kind of go back into the woods away from the lake a little bit, and then you come back to this beach on the lake, which is, there's a stream that comes out right over here, and you cross that stream and you go up a little rise, and that's where the trail up the ridge is. you kind of have to be paying attention because I don't think anybody does this trail. So it basically has no trail bed. I mean, it sort of does once you see it, and you can kind of tell where the trail goes. I was able to hike up it the mile up to the top without getting lost or stepping off the trail ever. And it is blazed, but it doesn't look like it's been reblazed for a very long time because they're very pale. Because like I said, through hikers, they're blazing. They don't want to take a mile-long side trail to go up some ledges, right? And it's so hard to get to as a day hike that it just doesn't get that much use. But there is a sign, but the sign's on a tree facing the other way. So when you go, I literally walked past it, and then when you get around over here, there's a side trail that comes down to the pond, and there's a beach there. And so I got to the side trail, said beach, and I was like, yeah, I went too far. So then I turned around and went back, and I was like, oh, look, there's a sign, which I hadn't noticed going the other way because it was facing the wrong way, and it's a very old and kind of half-rotted sign so that it looks like part of the natural world, not like a sign. But then you go up these ledges, up to the ledges, and the trail's kind of steep in places, but it's not terrible. The steepest spot is this spot right here, which doesn't look all that steep. But what made it so much fun was it's just dirt that you go down when you go back down, and it's, like I said, it's fairly steep, and this whole thing was covered with acorns. So you get up on top of the ledges, and you just got the great views to the south and to the east of that whole area of all those lakes, the Joe Mary Lakes and everything. They're really pretty. And that's Joe Mary Mountain across the head. That's the head of the Lower Joe Mary Lake. And then when you get to the end of the ledges, they make sure that you know you're at the end of the ledges. Which I don't know why you need that, because if you go about 10 feet past there, like when you get right up to here, it literally drops straight down into the woods. There's no way you could keep going. So great views, kind of remote, nobody goes here. I decided to see if you could get a view on the north side of the ridge so you could see Katahdin. And so I spent like an hour or more. There's the top of the ridge is fairly expansive, and there's all these open ledgy areas surrounded by trees that you can kind of connect between them. And I just did that for an hour, just going here, going there, trying to find spots. And I found a couple spots, I'm going to get a view here, because it starts to drop off, but there's too many trees. The slope is too gentle on the north side. So there's no view to the north, but it's still a nice hike. And my car survived, so. I've actually only hiked Indian Mountain twice. The first time I did it, when I did my Greenville book, I did it in a thunderstorm, which was interesting. And I didn't see any of the views. So I decided for this book I had to go back so I could get some good pictures. You start out on the road that leads back to the little Lyford camps. And in fact, where the trailhead is, the trail goes up Indian Mountain, and there's a trail on the other side of the road that drops right down to the camps. You go through the woods, you connect to the ski road. You take the ski road for a couple tenths of a mile, and then you turn back onto the Indian Mountain Trail, and you go past this giant boulder, which has a nice crack in the middle of it. And you can tell that the two pieces, it's part of the same rock. And you go around it, and then you start to climb. And when you get up to the base of the cliffs that you're climbing up towards, you realize you can see the spot where that rock fits before it fell down. And then you get up there, so the cliffs are just on the right here, and then you kind of skirt around the cliffs, and then you get to the end of those cliffs, and then you go up these set of wooden stairs, which you can see the beginning of there. Pretty steep. This hike is short. It's only 3 miles out and back, but I list it as strenuous because the climbing part is just relentless, how steep it is. About halfway up the mountain, there's a little side trail that goes out to, I say Laurie's Ledge, that's my little sister's name is Laurie, because I'm from the Midwest, and Laurie is Laurie, not Lori. But I think it's probably pronounced Laurie's Ledge here in New England. So it's a little open area that they have gone back, and I think they now cut trees down to keep it open. But it's a little rock face with it where it drops off and you get a view. So this on this picture here, you're looking. That's the Whitecap Range. And then I took a slightly. Uh-oh.
Snowing.
Yeah, then we had a blizzard. What did it do? Well, that's weird.
Landslide.
My laptop wasn't, the HDMI cable on my laptop doesn't work, so I put it onto a drive and I'm using one of their computers.
It looks like it didn't convert.
It did it. It must have been, that must have been the maximum size. It didn't do the rest of the slideshow.
Oh, there's no more.
Yeah, there's no more. That's the, I didn't even check. Oh, no, wait.
Oh.
It just did that one.
It's just that picture.
It was 1.5 there.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll just go back to this
Well, I
one.
didn't, it looks like the image is there, but it's just the,
Yeah.
I don't know.
How do I, let's see, slideshow. Okay, good. The slide that's missing is slightly taken more to the right from that one at Laurie's Ledge, and you can see Katahdin. And in that one, you could see Whitecap more clearly, which I keep track of Whitecap because when you drive out of, my son went to Bangor High School, and I used to have to drive him to, when I was teaching Huss, and I would take him to school every day. And then when I would come home, you go, right before you drop down the hill, go past Duncan and Giffords, you can see Whitecap. And so you can always tell it's Whitecap, even in the summer if the air's clear, you can see that it has the open part of the summit. And of course, for much of the year, just like Katahdin, it's got snow on it more before and later than anything else. I found out the hard way though. I knew this. I don't know what I wasn't thinking. I was anxious to go hike Whitecap from the south again because the road going in the Southwood for a long time you couldn't drive on it past High Bridge. But they did some logging up there and they regraded it so you could drive up to the trailhead again. And so I was real gung-ho to do that, and so I did it when I noticed that there was no more visible snow on the mountain.
Mhm.
So you go up, and it's an old fire warden's trail, so it's pretty steep. Although it's not as steep as it used to be. They just last year rebuilt, or the year before last, rebuilt it, and they made it go like this instead of going just like that. But you get into the saddle between Hay Mountain and Whitecap, and as I'm getting close there, I keep seeing patches of snow, and I was like, well, this is fine. I can live with this, right? And, I was basically dressed the way I am today. And I got into the saddle, and the snow was about that deep.
In the saddle.
Yeah, and it was that, kind of late season, kind of slushy snow where it had frozen and thawed, so it was like the corn snow, but it's kind of mushy at this point, right? So I just did it. About halfway up, I stopped by a tree, and I'm like red from here down, and my feet are numb, and I'm leaning on this tree, and a boreal chickadee comes and lands on the tree right next to me and like chirps at, scolds me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I need. All right, but back to Indian Mountain. If you continue up past Laurie's Ledge and you get to the top, the trail doesn't actually go over the top. It kind of skirts around the north side of the summit to an overlook, and that's another overlook that I think they now continue to cut trees down so that it doesn't fill in, so that it continues to be an overlook. And if you look to the west, you see this, which is Horseshoe Pond, Elephant Mountain, and then through the gap there, if you know exactly where you're looking, you can see Moosehead Lake. Just a just a really beautiful view. And then if you turn right, is Baker Mountain. And when you're there, Baker Mountain looks bigger in person. It looks like it's about to land on you. That is a big mountain with several summits and these arms that come out from it. But it's just, because of where Indian Mountain sits, right south of the Lily Bay Mountains, just north of Barren Mountain, and kind of at the west end of the Whitecap Range, as you're climbing the mountain from the various overlooks and things, you just get all these great views of all these wonderful mountains around you. So it's a nice hike. Yeah, Baker Mountain has a trail to the top. From number 4, you can go up to Baker Mountain, but the summit has no view. It's in the woods. Just before you get to the summit, there's a spot where the trees are all only about this high because it's a steep slope, and that's all the higher the spruce can get, and you can look over those trees and you get a nice view of Moosehead Lake. And there's a couple of places where you can look back down the trail and across the valley. You can see Katahdin in the distance. But the summit itself has no view. Supposedly, the AMC was going to continue that trail from the top all the way to Horseshoe Pond. So down to the kind of down here. And I talked to the crew that was making it. The first time I did the trail up Baker, they weren't done with it yet. And I ran into the crew about a mile above. There's a logging road, a little old logging road, it's a snowmobile trail now that you cross, which is where they were camping. And I passed them above that, and there was no more trail. But they said they had it flagged the rest of the way. You'll be fine, just keep going, follow the flagging. So I did that. So when I came back, I was talking to them, and I was asking them, when they were going to be done with this, and were they going to continue down the other side? Because that where they were working is state land. And on the other side of Baker Mountain, this side of Baker Mountain, is AMC land. And for some weird bureaucratic reason, they had a permit to build the trail in the state land, but not any AMC land, even though it's an AMC crew. I didn't understand that. But they said they were hoping to get that worked out, and then they'd be back to build the other side as soon as they got that worked out. And that was 5 years ago, maybe, and there's still no trail. And if you get supposedly a 1/10 of a mile or 2/10 of a mile across the summit from where the trail does exist, there's open ledges with the view where you can look this way from the top of Baker Mountain. I thought about trying to bushwhack that when I was there, but the summit is all, the spruce trees that are like this high, all packed together, and no, it wasn't going to happen. Maybe someday. All right, Monument Cliffs on Third Mountain. This is another one that's relatively easy to do in the AMC land. I guess technically it's the AT. The climb up to the Appalachian Trail isn't too bad. There's just one section at the top where you have this ladder, which is falling apart. See, this is another one. See how she's exaggerating the arm because she's pretending to hike. You get that little steep spot there, and then other than that, and then when you turn north on the Appalachian Trail, and there's a little roller coastering before you get to Third Mountain, including the last little bit of climbing. But it's not bad. It's a fairly easy hike. And then you get to the summit of Third Mountain, which is, if you're thinking north and south on the Appalachian Trail, I know we're really going east-west here, but if you think it's at the southern end of the mountain, because it's that, the long ridge that essentially goes all the way to Chairback. You get this partial view of Long Pond and the Lily Bay Mountains. So don't stop at the summit. Keep going another 1/10 of a mile or two, and you come to some nice monument ledges. Big, beautiful open ledges, kind of like the ledges on the top of Chairback, with a nice open view of the same thing. And then you can keep going, and then you drop down off of Third Mountain, and you'll come to, that's East Chairback Pond, right? I always get East and West Chairback Ponds backwards because in my head they are north and south. Yeah, that's East Chair. You come to East Chairback. No, is it East or West? Now I'm not trusting myself. But anyhow, you come to the first Chairback Pond, and where the Appalachian Trail crosses the outlet stream, there's a waterfall there.
That's West Chairback.
So yeah, it's West Chairback. And there's a side trail that goes up to the pond, which is kind of pretty. But it's a fairly long descent down off of Third Mountain to get there that you then have to redo to come back. Just to see a pond, and there's lots of those. But. All right, Big Wilson Cliffs is the last one. Everybody knows about the slate in Monson and everything. And Little Wilson Falls, which is right there, is that big slate gorge. But the Appalachian Trail follows across all these ledges after you go past Little Wilson Falls going northbound. and there's some real open areas, some cliffs and things. There used to be a side trail at one point that I can't find that went out to at the top of a cliff. It doesn't exist any there. Well, it's not a maintained trail, and I can't find it. Similarly, just north of here, so the Appalachian Trail crosses the river right here, and right here there used to be a side trail that went north a mile to Indian Falls,
Oh,
which is really hard to get to now, because you have to drive all the way up to Greenville and come back down to it. And it's kind of, it's the one hike in my books where I put in the directions. Actually use the miles because you're gonna need them. But I noticed at Indian Falls, if you cross the brook below Indian Falls, you can see blazes, old worn blazes in the woods. I'm like, what the heck, where do those go? And they're blue, which made me think this is something to do with the AT. So I get out my topo map and I realize it's only like a mile from the Appalachian Trail. You know, you think that it's really far apart because you had to go all the way around to get to it. But Big Wilson Cliffs, so you go over all these ledges. To start the hike, you go down an old logging road. Now this area out off, it's not part of the Appalachian Trail corridor that's below is owned by Elliottsville Plantation. And they have developed a couple of campsites there, and they have an information kiosk, and they build an there's like a privy that you can use. And for this hike, I start at the outhouse. In fact, when I mapped it for the book, the outhouse wasn't there yet, just the foundation was. And I said, you know, that looks like they're building an outhouse there. And then I took my wife back there, and I was like, sure enough, there's an outhouse there now. But you go down the logging road, you cross Little Wilson Stream on the snowmobile bridge, and you just keep going, and you go past a couple of burrow pits, and then you just can hear Big Wilson Stream in the woods, and then it kind of turns and follows upstream. And then a couple of places you can see Big Wilson Stream below you, but you never come really all that close to it. Until you drop back down, and come to the Appalachian Trail. What I recommend is instead of turning south to do the ledges, first go north about a half a mile. And you come to this, there's like an S bend in the stream there, and it's a really pretty spot. And there's this really big tree on this side of the stream. You can sit beneath it and have a nice snack and enjoy the stream. And Thompson Brook comes out right there. And if you bushwhack up Thompson Brook about 3/10 of a mile, you come to this waterfall.
oh, but that's not the good one.
What do you mean that's not the good one?
That's not the good one. You go a quarter mile above that, and there's a 3-tiered 80-foot waterfall.
We're gonna have to go back, there's another one? I didn't know there was two, nobody told me that. See, this is why I do these things, so I can learn. All right, so I know what I'm gonna be doing at some point later this summer. Well, I guess I'll wait till the fall. This is a really good hike. You notice, you can see I did this in the fall. This is a really good hike to do in the fall because it's one of the best for colors. So if you then head southbound on the Appalachian Trail, you kind of skirt around some cliffs, and then you go up this notch between.
Let me interrupt you. This is the one you just showed, okay?
Yeah,
In a little bit higher water.
yeah,
This is the one a quarter mile above that. That's the lower tier.
and it's
It's a triple. That's about 20 feet. There's a 40-foot fall that comes straight down and exits
and
sideways.
it's in a gorge too. Can you get around it and get up to the other
You
ones?
can, it's difficult, but there's another picture. And that's just the lower tier. It's a triple waterfall.
Yeah, exactly.
This weekend.
This is like Gauntlet Falls.
Like what?
Gauntlet Falls. I don't know
Gauntlet?
if you guys know Gauntlet Falls. It's off the Joe Mary Road. When you go into Joe Mary Road, you go in 6 miles, and then Joe Mary Road makes a right-hand turn, and the road goes straight. If you go straight, I think it's called the Johnson Pond Road. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you go in there, and you come to where there's a big snowplow, an old snowplow sitting there, and you turn left there, and it takes you down to Gauntlet Falls.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sign at some point that tells you, because there's a couple of campsites along the road down to Gauntlet Falls.
Yeah, but you've got 3 waterfalls there. You've only been to the first one, I'll bet.
Oh, no. So I went to Gauntlet Falls when I was working on the waterfall book, and I take a picture. It's kind of cool. It's slate, and it drops in this crack, and then goes in this really deep pool between these 2 overhanging things of slate. And then there's a big pool below that. And so I decided after a hike one day, I told my wife, hey, you need to see, this is a pretty cool waterfall. We went there on a Saturday or a Sunday. It was like the big giant party
Yeah.
place. There was like 20 pickup trucks in the parking area at the end of the road, people blasting music, and I knew my wife wasn't interested because she just didn't like the vibe. But I had the first time I went there, I had bushwhacked downstream to a couple more waterfalls below. But I knew on the topo map that there was Mud Gauntlet Falls,
Right.
which different maps showed in different places.
Mhm.
One of the maps shows it on the Pleasant River, and one of the maps I have shows it on Mud Gauntlet Stream. And I was like, well, I have to check this out. So I went back last year when I was working on this book, and I went all the way down to Mud Gauntlet Stream. And just before Mud Gauntlet Stream is a waterfall that's way higher than the official Gauntlet Falls. And there's a whole bunch of waterfalls in between that are really, pretty. And it's a fairly easy bushwhack because most of the time you can be on the rocks along the stream. There's only a couple of places where there's like cliffs that come down into the water where you have to go back into the woods a little bit, but not for very much. But below that big waterfall, you can actually walk across rocks, at least when I was there, you can walk across rocks below the pool, and you can see where Mud Gauntlet Stream comes out, and I just went over this little hill and then followed it upstream, and there's a Mud Gauntlet Falls I don't know which one is actually, maybe they're both Mud Gauntlet Falls, the one on the river and the one on the.
I think the one on the river is Mud Gauntlet, but that's just me. I've never been all the way.
So, but if you
upstream.
go up the stream, and it's less than a half a mile, you come to it's a crack slide where the water drops down, and the stream's on, where the water's only like that wide. But it drops like 40 or 50 feet.
Oh, wow.
It's a big waterfall. I was like, so see, I didn't miss that one. But I missed this one. And Mud Gauntlet I did put in the book because I figure if you're buying a hiking guide, you can follow a stream out and back. That's not going to kill
Here
you.
are the upper two tiers of that one.
Wow, that is really big.
That's a 10-foot waterfall.
That little uppermost tier, that's 40 feet easily.
Yeah, I'm definitely going. It's supposed to rain this weekend, but maybe I'll do it anyway. All right, so on the AT here, when you get up on the ledges here, there's looking back down as you're approaching the top of the first ridge. And then you get to the top and you walk across this ledge through the woods. And then you follow that ledge and then it becomes a different ledge. And then eventually you drop down, drop back into the hardwoods, cross a little like col, and then climb back up again. And you do that a couple of times. It's really pretty. And then eventually you get to, which I think is technically I think Big Wilson Cliffs is near the beginning of this section, where there used to be a side trail that went out, as opposed to this, which I think most people call Big Wilson Cliffs now, because it's this long open area, and it's where you have great fall colors. See, there's my wife on the ledges. I have a picture that I took of my dog in the winter standing on these ledges. And I was like where my wife is and the dog's like where I am. And I took a picture of the dog, and right in the background is Borestone Mountain.
Nice.
So when I was mapping for this book, I did it like 3 times. I kept looking for that spot, and I couldn't find it. And so I except you can't see it anymore.
Oh, okay.
It's grown
grown
up. I got to that spot, where I said, oh, because I looked at I took a picture of the picture that's hanging. It's actually hanging at the top of our stairs at home. I took a picture of that, and so I got to here, and I opened up my phone, and I'm looking at the picture, and I'm like going back and forth along the ledges trying to find the spot where the picture was taken, and I found the spot. And I looked there, and I was like, yeah, you can't see the mountain anymore. The trees have grown up, because that picture of the dog was taken like 25 years ago. But you don't need to be able to see Borestone to enjoy the view, because like I said, the fall color's really nice. And then if you feel like it, you can just head over you can do this as a loop, which is like 6 miles, or you can add like a mile to your hike and continue southbound on the Appalachian Trail and go all the way over to Little Wilson Falls, which I'm convinced it's impossible to take a picture of the whole waterfall.
Yes.
I have also spent time trying to figure out a good way to get to the other side of the stream to do that.
Haven't found a way yet.
No, when the water is, well, first off, when you do waterfall pictures, you don't want to take them when the water's too low. But when the water's really low, you can actually cross up there at the top and go across.
Yeah.
But then the water's not as interesting anyway. But I couldn't figure out how to get from there all the way to what would be the base of the waterfall. And I'm convinced the only way to do it is where the AT crosses the stream is just swim up the stream.
Yeah, that's good.
And that would work.
The old
We've
days,
tried every which way to,
Yeah.
because I'd love to get that full
Yeah.
waterfall.
And it looks like there's a spot on the other side where it's open enough and you get the view.
And I've heard somebody say there was a trail that came up the other side. I've never found it.
Now, one time when I was there, this was a long time ago, there was like an Upward Bound group that was there, and they had put a Tyrolean across the waterfall. And were, taking people across. I said, well, then that would work.
the old AT used to actually cross above the falls and looped around and came down and hit eventually where where the present trail is now. But that's like back in the sixties or seventies.
And it's probably so overgrown now you wouldn't be able to find the
Yeah.
trail.
I have some maps that might show it though.
This is a low water shot up in the gorge. But the problem is, if there's any kind of water coming down, you've got about a 10-foot waterfall there that you can't negotiate. And that would be after slogging
Well,
way steep
I have
through
to
the
admit,
water.
I've done things like that.
But you can't go up the gorge straight to the base of this falls because there's at least one on the way.
Yeah, there's
Might-
other
might be
waterfalls on the
another
way,
one.
and the slate is so hard to climb. It's not like, what's the big gorge in Zion that you hike up? In Zion National Park in Utah,
Yeah.
the Virgin River comes out of this gorge that is literally in places 20 feet across and almost 300 feet deep. And depending on what the weather is, you can get a permit to hike up the gorge. And so it's so much fun. You get to the end of the road and all the tourists come out to, there's like literally a patio there with like a little stone wall, and it's right at the edge of the river. And you just walk up onto the patio and jump off of the patio and jump in the water and just start walking. And we went up like 8 miles. And the water moves through there. There's a couple of places, some places there's a little bit of a gravel on the side you can get up out of the water, but mostly you're in the water. But like where there'll be like little waterfalls or little rapid areas, and a couple of those, you kick a rock that's this big in the water and it just moves because the water's moving such force. And we climbed up a couple of side canyons, and it was easier than that stuff. But of course it was, up above it was 90 degrees, and the water wasn't freezing cold. All right, so I have a website where I post extra hikes and additions to hikes and things. I don't use it as much as I used to because being a high school teacher is a lot of work. And it's way more work than teaching college was. And so I don't really have as much time as I used to do as much stuff. But I still do sometimes. And I especially put a lot of stuff on. A lot of times when I publish a book, I'll have to cut a hike or two from it for length reasons because they have so many pages I'm allowed to use. And I'll put those extra hikes on my website, so those are on there. Sometimes if there's new trails, I'll just put those on there. And I was feuding for a long time with my publisher at whether or not they were going to let me do a guide to Down East. And they said no, and over again. So I put a lot of Down East hikes on there.
Why would they say no?
They claimed that it would compete with the Acadia books, their Acadia guides. And I'm thinking, no, Acadia may be in Down East, but I could make an entire book of like 50 or 60 hikes. Not a single one of them is in Acadia. I don't see what the problem is.
Right.
But it's different people do. I do all the Falcon guides for Maine except for Acadia, which the Acadia book probably sells as much of all of mine put together, probably more than all of mine put together.
Did you call it Washington County?
But I tried selling it all different ways, and they just won't
They won't do Gold Coast,
They won't budge on
or
it.
Gold Coast.
I tell them, that's like one of the most famous places in the state.
Right.
Right.
You need to have a guide with that in.
Yep.
But so anyhow, I put some things on my, I need to rebuild my website. I need to find some high school kid who, there's more tech savvy than me, can rebuild my website so it's more user friendly. But there's some useful stuff on it. That's a picture from Otter Pond looking at Barron Slide.
And that is Mud Gauntlet Falls.
And that's Mud Gauntlet Falls. I also
The
use,
one I like is the one above that, not the first falls, but there's a lower
Yeah.
Gauntlet Falls. That's a really pretty spot. They're very quiet too.
yeah, there's lots of good swimming holes along this section of the river too. I use Facebook. Again, every time I do a hike, I post something about it, and a lot of times I post little short videos, since I can't put videos in the books. So my Facebook page, and my website won't support videos because I don't pay enough money to get that much memory. So on my website, if you want to see videos, it links you to my Facebook page, and there's probably like 100 or 200 videos on my Facebook page. My students the first thing they do when they find out you have a name is they go online and they're like, oh my God, you really are famous. But a lot of my students kind of, initially they started trolling me on Facebook, like going on Facebook, but then you realize I didn't post anything personal on my Facebook because you don't do anything but hikes. It's like, yeah, that's the point. So I usually post something like every week, when I go to a new hike. Like yesterday I think I told you guys I did Burnt Meadow Mountain, so I posted a video this morning from that hike. And if I go find that waterfall this week, I'll post that. That one might make my website. I'll actually extend my directions from the loop to that. I can't believe I didn't know that there was another higher waterfall up there.
Well, if Alan Bray, you may know the name, most of these people do, grew up in Monson, and they used to hike in that area a lot when he was a kid, and local artist, very prominent, very well known. But he told me about that waterfall, and the first time I went there, I found the one that you pictured.
Yeah.
Okay? And I thought that was the one he was talking about. It was low water, it didn't look like anything. And I said,
Yeah, at low water or what?
Yeah, what's the deal? And they said, no, you gotta go further up. And I did, and that's what I found. That three-tiered waterfall, I think is, by my estimate, which could be off, but my estimate is twice as high as Little Wilson is.
That's a lot. I've had, since I did the waterfall book, I've had this ongoing debate with myself about what constitutes the highest waterfall in Maine. Because there's lots of different ways to measure it.
Katahdin Falls.
And I decided that the two highest waterfalls in the state are Katahdin Falls and Reddington Pond Falls, neither of which you can get to. Reddington Pond Falls is in western Maine. It's kind of part on the Sugarloaf Massif. And it's in a super secret Navy training base where they train Navy SEALs on survival things.
They train Navy SEALs to climb mountains, like what?
Yeah, and evidently they train a lot of international soldiers and stuff there too. But supposedly, there used to be, the train went from Strong over to Stratton, and it went right along the south shore of Reddington Pond. And supposedly you could see the waterfall from the train. I've tried to find a picture of it, but I needed to go to Strong and go through there, if they have a historical society, go through their archives and find out if they have a picture of it. But I haven't been able to find a picture online of it. But supposedly it's over 300 feet high, single drop. And if you look at the topo map, that seems not implausible. Katahdin Falls, the only way, it's kind of at the head of Witherley Ravine. And the only way to see it is from the Owl. And I scoured through my pictures taken from the top of the Owl, and I have one where you can kind of see it. But I didn't know specifically to take a picture of it when I was up there, so I didn't. You can hear it when you're up there really easily, really well. But yeah, those are the two highest. Angel Falls isn't even in the run yet. Which, when I first moved to Maine, everybody told me that was the highest waterfall in Maine.
What was?
Angel Falls.
Oh,
So what's the highest waterfall you can get to?
Probably Angel Falls.
No, the
How high is
middle Bickford slide is higher than Angel Falls.
How high is Katahdin Stream Falls? Not the,
That's over 60, but it's a double drop. It drops and then
Yeah.
drops again. If you count the whole thing, I think it's probably higher than Angel Falls, but it's not a single drop. Again, it's how you count it. Mad River Falls is undoubtedly higher than Angel Falls. It's, you can throw a rock to New Hampshire from it. It's right on the border there. What's that? Is that 115? The road that goes from Freiburg up to Gilead, and it winds in and out of New Hampshire and Maine. The trailhead is from there, and actually the trailhead to Bickford slides and Mad River Stream, it's the same parking lot, just one's on one side of the road and one's on the other side of the road. And when you get to Mad River Falls, the trail climbs up this high hill, and you get to the top of the hill and you look across the valley and you can see the waterfall. And it's 3 drops, and each one is at least 100 feet. But you can't see all 3 of them at once. But that's, if you count all those as one, that's probably the highest waterfall you can hike to in the state. It's a relatively easy hike. It's because until you get to the very end, it's all flat. You're just following the Mad River, which isn't very mad most of the time. You have to cross it like 6 times, and there's a whole bunch of waterfalls, lower waterfalls along the way. It's a pretty hike. It's probably pretty mad in the spring. Maybe that's why it gets its name. All right, so thanks everybody for coming. Do we know where that is?
what cat?
Yeah, Wake Up. I always on my laptop I will put new pictures on as the background on my when we go on a hike and I get some nice pictures or lighting is good or whatever, and I'll put some picture on them. That picture's been on my laptop for like 2 years now. I can't bear to take it down. Does anybody have any questions? Put them all to sleep. Thanks. I do have copies of my